Gentlemen, please help me in joining and welcoming Dr. Tim Milea.
Thank you, Father. I'm having my name alongside all of those you just mentioned, you know, saints and things. Let's don't raise the bar too high, okay? It is really so good to be here tonight. When I discovered that there was going to be lasagna, I was a little upset because I knew I would be up here. And if I got a belly full of lasagna like I usually want, it's not going to go very well up here. So I have moderated my cravings significantly tonight, just to make sure I can get through this. If anybody dozes off after eating lasagna, I get it, okay? So, and, you know, what I want to talk about tonight, we'll get into in just a little bit, but I want to talk about where this comes from. Now, I see that my favorite heckler, Devin, is here. And you came in at the last minute, you know. I thought, yeah, he's going to try to sneak in. You talk about raising the bar. Look at who I have to follow. These three guys, I have to follow all of them. But I know Devin well. I know Father Charles well. Bishop Tilka, I met him shortly after he was installed. We were in a crunch to have the bishop. It was just right at the transition. We have our white mass, our CMA, Catholic Medical Association, white mass every fall. Bishop Tilke, he's just been installed. He's got a million things to do. You imagine what that job is like. Can you celebrate the Mass? Absolutely. He comes right over and celebrates the Mass. Now, I want to leave a little advice here. Here's my secret to my old life. Surround yourself with holy people like this, because I'm convinced I get into heaven only on somebody else's coattails, okay? So, I want to make one quick plug here. I mentioned the Catholic Medical Association. My good friend, Dr. Peruchin's here. It's all his fault that I got involved in this in the first place. So he said they won't believe me. They can't understand Slovakian. So, but if you know anybody that works in healthcare, and frankly, we have about 8% of our members nationally that are not working in are not in healthcare. They're just interested. But the website, the national, is the top, cathmed.org. Our local organization is the bottom. I think Michael and I, we can tell you without hesitation, it's the most inspiring group of medical people we've ever been involved with. And, you know, to be in this parish, I finally tonight figured out the divine mercy concept, you know, between St. Patrick's and Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I'm always taken with Our Lady of Guadalupe, but as an obnoxious Irishman, I want to bring something up today for Demand Equal Time. 146 years ago today was Mary's appearance, the apparition at Knock in County Mayo in Ireland, along with Joseph, John the Evangelist as well. So there's my plug for the Irish, but regardless of who's in charge, Mary's got it under control. So, and another important thing today is the day that the church honors Pius X, Pope 1903 to 1914. And so if there are any pious parishioners here, this is your day. But I want to read you a quote that I think is a good segue into what we want to talk about tonight. And this is what Pius said about the church as a whole. Our apostolic mandate requires from us that we watch over the purity of the faith and the integrity of Catholic discipline. It requires from us that we protect the faithful from error. And keep that quote in mind as we go. And finally, my last reason I'm happy to be here is kind of selfish. I'm very accustomed to talking to a room of doctors. Doctors are terrible audiences. Half of them, they know everything anyway. And believe it or not, sometimes they show up late. And they look like this. They're on their phone, they're sleeping, they're planning their golf game, So thank you for being normal. This is my pleasure. All right, let's get down to the brass tacks here. Tonight, I'm going to talk about something that can be a very difficult subject for anybody. It can be very touchy. It is immensely personal. But when you think about it, up until, 10, 15 years ago, was this even on our radar? Was this something that, since this past decade, it's exploded in our news, on our streets, and in our minds. But regardless of how this has happened, there's one point I want to open with that is extremely important and should not be ignored. Anybody that has to deal with gender-related issues, and anybody that loves that person, they deserve the same respect and dignity and compassion and care as anyone else. It is an extremely difficult problem for them. They deserve attention to their needs, but they deserve truthful attention. They deserve honest attention. They should not be shunned or punished in any way. They just deserve our love, and they already have God's love. We know that. Because they want and they need what we all want and need, and that's truth and purpose and meaning in their life, and a community that provides that to them. So I want to commend you first for being here, because this is something that more people should be doing. They need to know more. The only way to grapple with these issues is to learn, is to attend to the questions and get down to the structural, foundational answers to those questions. Maybe somebody you know, somebody you love is dealing with these issues. And maybe you yourself are as well. But the only way to become a better person, a better parent, a better child, a better friend, is to ask these questions and to get these answers. Now, I'm a child of the late 60s, early 70s. Those were crazy. Those of you who were there, crazy, turbulent times. But when we heard information about campus bombings and Kent State shootings and all of that, we didn't get it till the next morning. All of this information today, boom, instantaneous. So we've got to keep up with that. And in my lifetime, I don't think there's been a greater need for godly people like you than we have right now. Now, a short table of contents for this. First, I want to talk about some definitions, make sure we're clear on that. Then I'll kind of go over a synopsis of what does gender transition, what's that process entail? And then, believe it or not, I'm going to have some good news. It's not as good as we'd like it to be. There's some bright spots in all of this. And then we'll start coming in for a landing at the end. I want to talk about with some advice and suggestions, some personal, some spiritual, that I hope will help you. And not only with this issue, but when you think about all of the other fads and trends and cool things that we're supposed to be doing, how do you deal with those? And my favorite part at the end of it, I'm going to do my darndest to leave a few minutes for questions and comments, because it never fails. When I talk to people, and particularly a non-medical audience, every time I get a question, and I have to say, I'll have to get back to you on that. Because you think outside the box. You think outside of our medical box. We tend to be limited to what we think we know. All right, first definition, genre. Everybody's familiar with that word. Music genre, movie genre. Genre is an old French word, means shared traits. And that's where the word gender comes from. That's what it's derived from. And then the title of this talk, Genesis Gender, the beginning of shared traits. We're talking about shared traits. Now, we know in the second chapter of Genesis, God creates Adam. I think it's interesting. In the first chapter, he said he created them male and female, but they didn't get into specifics till the second chapter. But that's, who am I to say how you should write it? But I want to go down a rabbit hole here for just a minute with you, because I think this is really cool. This came to my attention. My wife Beth and I were at International Shroud of Turin conference a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And this, I had never thought about this till a neurologist at the podium mentioned it. So, who painted it? Michelangelo. Where is it? Look at you guys. See, doctors wouldn't know that. Okay, now, here's the fun part. Keep in mind, okay, look at where God is and look what's around him. Look at the brown outline around. What's that look like? Michelangelo dissected dead people so he would know how to sculpt and paint well. He could reproduce the anatomy. Isn't that something? I had never thought about that. This neurologist was in the Sistine Chapel, and this guy looks at brains all day long, and you go, "Whoa, that looks familiar." So, okay, we're out of the rabbit hole now. All right. 15 verses after Adam, God creates Eve. Okay, so we set the stage. Male and female, he created them. Did they have shared traits? Yeah, absolutely. They walked upright. They talked. 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 nose, 1 mouth. They had shared traits. And we know in Genesis what it said, and Mark went on to repeat it in his gospel, that God created them male and female. But did they share all traits? No. Obviously, they're different. Adam's traits were shared not with Eve. He had traits that were shared with every member of the male sex that came afterwards. And Eve, every member of the female sex that came afterwards. The dichotomy of shared traits with that. And that dichotomy, male-female, isn't just a 21st century thing, obviously. In the Near East, in Mesopotamia, there are manuscripts from 3000 BC, men posing as women, women posing as men. As long as there have been humans, there have been these kinds of gender issues. And even before America became America, 1692, Mary Henley is arrested walking down the street in Boston because she was wearing men's clothes, charged with confounding the course of nature. Simpler time. Surgeries that were intended to change genders first showed up in medical literature in Weimar, Germany, early 20th century. But the first publicized case in the States started with a World War II veteran from the Bronx named George Jorgensen. After the war, George, in 1952, went to Copenhagen. He had heard about a doctor that could help him deal with his gender confusion. Undergoes medication. He has surgeries done. A few years later, he comes back. George is now Christine. He came back, and when the New York papers found out about it, there was 50-50 fanfare and outrage. It's divisive from the beginning. So let's get into some other definitions. What is biological sex? Quite simply, it's the scientific characteristics of male or female. Objective scientific characteristics. Anatomy, hormones, chromosome, DNA, everything is objective. In contrast, gender means a person's self-representation, meaning the socially common characteristics of men or women. Not anatomy, not chromosomes, not DNA. Gender is a psychological concept that's based on thoughts and feelings and personal impressions, personal emotions on subjective factors, not objective factors. And the final definition I want to talk about is gender identity. And that's someone's personal identification of their own gender. And that's where the debate starts. If someone feels they are not what their biological sex says they are, that's what is known as gender dysphoria. I'm sure you've heard that term. It's a disconnect. What I look like and what I think about myself doesn't fit. So suppose somebody, a preteen or a teen or a young adult with gender dysphoria is convinced that they need to change. They need to transition if they want to be happy or whole. That's their belief. So let's go down that process. Let's go down that pathway. The first step is pretty simple, pretty harmless. Social transition. You change your hairstyles, change your wardrobe, your name, your pronouns, etc. Social transition is the first step. But if they move on to the next step in that pathway, then they get into puberty blockers. And for those who are keeping score at home, gonadotropin-releasing hormone agonists. So, yeah, say that. I'm an orthopod. I can't believe I even said that, you know? There's no bone in that hormone. So, now, with these puberty blockers, if the person is young enough, that will either stop puberty from happening or stop it where it is. Either prevent it or stop its progress. Because these are drugs that suppress or stop the release of sex hormones. You give this to a boy, he doesn't make testosterone. You give it to a girl, she doesn't make estrogen. It's a pause. If the gender-affirming care proponents, we're going to pause your puberties until we can figure this out. If they move to the next step beyond that, then we get into cross-sex hormones. Once they've completed the puberty blockers, then you give estrogen to the boys or testosterone to the girls. And this is where physical changes start to happen. The girls on testosterone will develop a deeper voice. They'll have more acne. Their body hair gets thicker. The guys will develop small breasts and their body hair will start thinning. And even in the medical literature that supports these interventions, they also confirm the emotional lability, meaning the instability of emotions in these young people. More frequent, more intense outbursts of anger and sadness. We've had 5 teenagers. You get outbursts, but this is on a much bigger scale. And then the next and final step is the surgical intervention. Intended to change the external appearance so it fits the chosen gender. Without getting into too much details, there's 2 basic classifications. There's top surgeries and bottom surgeries. One data point that is critically important to remember. If a person goes through the medical phase, 80% of them will go on to have at least 1 surgery done. And most of them will have multiple surgeries done. So once they're in the pathway, it becomes increasingly unlikely they're going to get out of it. So once they're in, they're generally all in. And if any of these steps are completed, medical or surgical or both, what's done is done. The changes are not reversible. So in medicine, what do we do in medicine? We treat problems with medications and surgery, right? That's what we do. So, as Sally said, what's the big fuss? Well, the problem is medicine and surgery for physical problems, yes, but this is not a physical problem. This is a psychological and emotional difficulty. Is there anything physically wrong with their body at the beginning of all this? No. Why are we treating a normal body with medications and surgery? Do they have difficulties trying to figure out their gender identity? Absolutely yes. That's the problem. That's the nexus of their problem. It's a self-perception problem, how they think about themselves. Extremely difficult, and I've had conversations with staunch supporters, I've had conversations with full transitioners. They're not blatantly crazy. They are confused and conflicted, and quite a bit of that is due to bad information. That's what we'll get into here in a minute. In medicine, we think about two things. Two basic factors go into every decision. What's the upside? What's the downside? If we do this, what bad things could happen? If we don't do this, what bad things could happen? Benefits versus risks. Over the past several years, there's been more and more medical evidence of the dangers and the harms and the downside of this. The data is coming in. We'll talk about where that's coming from in just a little bit. But what we know is that young people who only go through the medical phase, vast majority of them come out of the other end of it sterile for the rest of their life. Can't bear children, can't produce children. They're at higher risk just with the medical phase, at higher risk of heart attacks, blood clots, several types of cancer. Their bone density decreases when they're in their 20s, and they have a higher risk of fractures. That used to be my alarm clock, you know. So with the medical phase, that's what happens to them. That's the adverse effects for medical terminology. But if you go through all of it, the medical and the surgical, and there are a couple videos, surreptitious videos done of conferences about this, where the speakers are extolling the upside of gender clinics because they keep coming back. It's chronic care. It's a money machine. We can make money off them for the rest of their life. Their medical and surgical after effects of this, they become lifetime patients. It's ongoing management. It is not a cure. Now, there are multiple studies, not only about the problems with the treatments I just mentioned, but the inability of those treatments to improve their psychological and their emotional well-being. Those problems continue. And that includes the suicide rate after full transition. The part of the world that's had the most experience with these interventions, these clinics, is Western Europe. They have longer term follow-up. And you know what? There is a benefit to socialized medicine. They keep really good records. They know everything about everybody. And when you look at their data, and they're now publishing their data, you're probably familiar with the UK. The UK is shutting down the Tavistock Clinic, their big gender clinic. It's happened in Denmark. It's happened in Italy. The French are shutting it down. The Western European countries are going, hold the phone, we had no idea it was this bad. American doctors got to start paying attention. And just last year out of Finland, this is the suicide study I want to mention. If you look at adults who have fully transitioned, they've been through the whole gamut, the whole pathway. After that, their suicide rate is 19 times higher than the general population. So when you hear that, well, if you don't transition, you're you're probably going to suicide. That is not true. That is not true. So why is it happening? This is kind of an interesting chart. I mean, you look at all the things on here. These are just a fraction of the possible causes that lead to this. And you can see some of them, the autism and bullied for being a sissy and Munchausen and all of this stuff. And they all have a role in here. But this is like any other big problem. There's not just one cause. There's a lot of factors that go into this that we don't fully understand yet. Some people associate it with the pandemic and the isolation that came with it. Yeah, and what have we heard lately over the past since the pandemic, even before, the epidemic of loneliness. When you're lonely, it drives you to do things like this, to investigate things like this. We do know that autistic teens are more likely, as are young people with a history of pre-existing mental health conditions. Children that come from an abusive environment are more likely to be involved in this as well. And the social media link, lock it in. There's absolutely no doubt about that. That's a solid connection. There was a beautiful study done about 4 to 5 years ago, and they took a few thousand young people, teens, that came out as trans. And they went back and they looked at their social media usage in the 3 months before they came out. Off the charts. Off the charts. So the factors that go into this are it's multifactorial would be the fancy pants term. But I would just say the bigger question is, why does it happen at all? This isn't just COVID. It's not just Instagram. Why does it happen at all? And I think studies and studies and studies can be done, and they're important. But there are some things that science can't study very well, like the human heart. And I'm not talking about physical health, the wholeness, the goodness of the human heart. I think this problem happens when something's missing. Every one of us has a need. Like I said at the beginning, there's this need to belong, a need to be seen, a need to be important to someone or some group. A reason to get up in the morning and look forward to the day ahead. Some meaning and purpose in your life. But what if you're alone? You're confused. You're lonely. What if you don't have a reason to get up in the morning? You don't have a reason to go out somewhere, to school or to work, or just to meet people. And then one day online, somebody connects with you. And they pay attention to you. And they tell you how important you are. And they tell you how much better your life would be if you did this. If you're so deep in a hole, personally and spiritually, it's going to get your attention. You're going to be hearing from somebody who is so happy about what they did and why they did it and how they did it. And you should do it too. Think of how handsome, think of how pretty you would be if you did this, because you're in the wrong body. And that, more often than not, is the entry point to this pathway. Because when things are bad, it sounds good. Too good to be true. One of the biggest reasons it's a bad idea, and this just really troubles me, but 90% of preteens and teens that have gender dysphoria, if you leave them alone, if you just talk with them, if you just walk and accompany them, by the time they get to the end of high school, they will identify with their biological sex. No intervention. Keep your hands off them. Talk to them. Tell them the truth. So just think about that. When you hear gender affirming care, that means we're walking into a clinic and I think I'm a girl. Okay, we're going to here fill out these forms and we'll get you some estrogen now. You take 100 kids to a clinic. 90 of them, if they left, they'd be okay. All 100 go through. It's really tragic. I've had the privilege of conversations with several detransitioners. Young adults who've gone through the entire process and only after that realized, what have I done? I made a big mistake. I've learned more from them about this than I did from any textbook, any lecture, any medical journal. And I want to show you something that one of them introduced me to, which, frankly, I'm embarrassed to show you this because this entire talk can be done in one slide. This is the map of Detransition Island. A detransitioner put this together. We're going to take a trip. We're going to start on the upper left in the Sea of Distress. Things are so bad. The ship is just drifting, but into the Bay of Expectations, right by the siren of Simple Solutions. And you land on the beach at Love Bomb Village. That's the person who's telling you, or people online saying, you are great. Gosh, just think how much better you'll be when you do this. And you get caught up in that, and the next thing you do, you go through transition. You go to Mount Transition. And every one of these detransitioners told me that after that, what's up here is the meadows of gender euphoria. I did it. I survived. Look at me. Now I'm a girl. But then you see the little mountains in the middle, the medical complication mountains, right next to the valley of disenchantment. The thrill is gone. And then the ravine of regret and hindsight hill, and then you're slogging through the swamp of disappointment. This is not what I thought it would be. And you wander in the plains, in the desert, the lonely road through the wandering plains, until the forest of self-knowledge, you start to think, wait a minute, is this who I am? Or have I missed out on who I really am? And then you finally get back to the other beach, to Self-Compassion Cove. You stop feeling sorry for yourself and angry at yourself and everyone else, and you start feeling compassion for yourself. And you get on the next boat. And your next journey is in the ocean of self-acceptance. This is spot on what these detransitioners taught me. And there were 3 comments that they all had generally in common. One of them, nobody tried to stop me or even tell me to think twice. There was one young lady that said, my parents told me not to do it, but I was 14. Who listens to their parents when they're 14? I mean, legitimate point, maybe. Second comment, all my friends are online and they told me it was the only thing I could do to be happy. But every one of these detransitioners, when they decided to detransition, those friends threatened them, they intimidated them, they locked them out, they totally shut them out of their life. Worse than fair weather friends. They would have nothing to do with them. In a quick story, at a CMA meeting we had in Orlando a couple years, last year. We had 4 of these detransitioners do a 2-hour panel in front of 800 medical professionals. People who had been harmed by medical professionals were teaching medical professionals. It was the ultimate irony. It was incredible. But when one of them said, well, what we had to do at that meeting, we had to call the Orlando police before that meeting started, because we had to have extra police in front of the conference center where we were having the meeting, because there were a lot of online threats for our meeting. So the intimidation these people feel is real. And the third comment, the clinic told me the changes aren't permanent. The ladies still have deep voices and the men are having breast reductions. And every one of them is sterile. I asked one young lady if she could go back in time to her childhood and change anything, what would it be? She said, I wish I grew up in an Amish family. No internet, no smartphone. Protected. People around me. People that were consistent. These young people were some of the bravest people I've ever met because of what they went through and what they had to put up with. They know their life will never be normal. And they're going to have to deal with the damage, psychological, physical, emotional damage for the rest of their life. But they smile because they now have hope. They see a bright spot. And speaking of bright spots, I promised I have one for you. And most of that is because people like you get it. This is not that hard to figure out. If you have a brain like Michelangelo saw, and you think for yourself, instead of letting somebody else tell you what's going on, this is easy to figure out. I am embarrassed and outraged that organizations like the AMA and the American Academy of Pediatrics still double down on supporting this. They're going to change. But trust me on this, when they change their position, you're not going to hear about it. There's not going to be a press release. There is too much pride and hubris going on in this situation. But it's going to happen. Praise God sooner rather than later, but it's going to happen at some point in time. Because they know the Europeans are shutting it down. The Australians, the New Zealanders are shutting it down. And now, over the past 12 to 18 months, American doctors and clinics are being sued by their patients. And it's the American way. When the lawyers show up and they feel it in their wallets, things are going to change. And that's where it's happening. This industry is crumbling, thank God. But the damage, these detransitioners in their 20s and 30s, they're going to live 40, 50 years. And they're going to have to deal with this. This is not a ripple effect. This is an earthquake effect for them. Okay, so we've talked about where we've been, where we are. What about going forward? What about the future? What about our future? What should this all mean for me, for you, for your family, for your friends, for your community? And how to avoid getting caught up in this? And not just this, but every other cultural, societal trend or fad. I did my residency in surgery, a spine surgery fellowship down in Springfield. And my mentor, the chief of our department, wonderful, wonderful man, very conservative, politically and surgically. His mantra was, fellas, if you stay 2 fads behind, your patients won't get hurt. And that is the same kind of advice I'd say for this. Every new sparkly thing, every new cool thing, may not be that cool. So whether you're a son or a daughter or a parent or a friend, there is one thing that is the same and important for everybody, and that is honesty. Now, this is a quote from everybody's favorite neighbor, Mr. Rogers. Honesty will carry the day if you're honest with yourself and those closest to you. If you're confused, depressed, angry, life is just overwhelming, you talk with those people around you, the people you trust. The detransitioners assumed that everybody would be angry at them because they had decided to transition. So they didn't talk about it, except for the people who told them to do it. They never heard the other side. And that's not how important decisions are made. You need to communicate with people you trust, and particularly people who care for you so much that they know your feelings might get hurt, but they're going to tell you the truth anyway. Whether that's a parent, another important adult, a priest, a counselor, a therapist, a close friend, somebody who's going to give it to you straight. Because having your feelings hurt now, it's no fun. It's better than having your life ruined, regretting a bad decision. And for parents, this goes both ways. You know your kids better than anybody else does. And I want you to use the public safety motto. If you see something, say something. If something's different, speak up. Because if God wanted us to make big decisions entirely on our own, we'd each have our own desert island. There's some days I think that's a pretty cool idea, but a lot of sunscreen for this guy. But he didn't give us that. He gave us families and friends and communities for mutual support, leaning on each other. And he gave us himself, the ultimate counselor. One of my favorite stories from the detransitioners. A young man was an atheist, detransitioned, and during that process is when he realized God was real. He wants to be a priest. He's getting his PhD in scriptural studies, but because of what he went through, he recognizes and he understands the priesthood is not in the cards for him. So as we said before, God made a male and female. And male and female, God did not intend for those to be temporary and to be transient. It's permanent, just like our souls are permanent. It's yours and yours alone for eternity. That soul for each one of us is a work of beautiful art. And our job is to respect it, protect it, and care for it. And that respect for yourself and your body and your soul, I mean, we all fall short in many ways. We all have times when we're disappointed in ourselves and our lives. But the mistake that we make is we look outside for answers. We look online for answers. If I change my wardrobe, my life will be better. If I party more, my life will be better. If I change my gender, my life will be better. No. Those are things. Things don't give you happiness and fulfillment and flourishing. In fact, the opposite is true. I bet everybody in here has had the same experience as I'm going to mention. You know that person in your life that has nothing of material value, significant value, and they're the happiest person you've ever known. In my hometown, we had a guy named Nick. I grew up in a farm town of 800 people. Nick ran the town dump. And people would bring their trash down and dump it there. Nick built a house out of everybody's trash. We loved to go down to the river and fish because Nick's house, little shack, was next to the river. And people threw away food, it was Nick's food. I had some good fish in a skillet at Nick's shack. He was the happiest man I knew in my childhood. Take, for example, Philip Neary. This guy is the model of humility and poverty and an incredible sense of humor. I mean, the patron saint of comedians, basically. And how can you not like a guy whose icon shows him holding his dog? He had a little Maltese named Capriccio. And I can just see this. No, you're not going to do this unless I can hold my dog. You know, just pose for that portrait. So the secret, having so little and being so happy, is because people like this don't look outside themselves for that contentment. They look inside. They understand what is meaningful in their life. They make time to sit quietly, alone, think, and pray. Because their answers don't come through the internet. Their guidance doesn't come from TikTok. They understand that their smartphone and their computer are not toys. They're tools. And tools can build. But used incorrectly, tools can destroy. A hammer builds, a hammer breaks. Now, don't get me wrong. The internet itself is not inherently evil. When I spoke in here a month or two ago to high school kids, I confirmed this with Father Peter. If you watch a YouTube video of how to clear out a clogged sink, you don't need to go to confession, okay? You can be on the internet, okay? It's not, Dante says nothing about the internet. But if you get the urge, you start doom scrolling, swipe right, swipe left, and you are going down that black hole, stop. Just stop. Shut it down. Hard to do sometimes. But remind yourself that you deserve better than that. You only got so many heartbeats in this life. Don't waste them on junk. Because it's your interior self that matters the most. Your exterior self, your physical self, is the way God packaged you. I mean, I'm not entirely happy with the way He packaged me. That's my problem. But the important thing is spending that time with yourself and with Him. Interiorly, I think we very sorely underestimate the beauty and the truth and the goodness within each one of us. It's there. We just bury it with the stuff in our lives. Think about walking into a church on a bright, sunny day. A church with big stained glass windows. When you're outside, they're just dark. They're dull. You walk inside, boom. It's glorious. It's bright. It's alive. That's what you're looking for inside. Not the self someone else says you are or that you should be. Many years ago, early in practice, the little old man became a patient of mine. And this guy, I was kind of kidding with him. I looked at his medical history. And I told him, I said, every time you fill one of these out, put down what hasn't happened to you. It'll save you a lot of time. It was just like War and Peace on a medical history, And he was incredibly sweet and gracious and happy. He laughed at my jokes. I thought he was a pretty cool guy. But there was one thing he said. When I asked him one time, I said, in spite of all of this, you are just a good guy. And he said, well, my difficulties are God's way of telling me that I still have work to do before I die. That's the attitude we take with the crosses that we have to bear. So life can be hard. Life is not fair. But if you want to get good advice to get through it, there's a guy that has been my coach, my mentor, my kick-me-in-the-pants friend, and that's St. Paul the Apostle. A little biased here because I'm a member of St. Paul the Apostle in Davenport, but think about what he told the Corinthians. No trial has come to you but what is human. Stop right there. What is the trial that's human? I'm supposed to be a girl. That's a human trial. He didn't bring that on. And Paul goes on, God is faithful and will not let you be tried beyond your strength. But with the trial, he will also provide a way out so that you may be able to bear it. Did you catch that? A way out. That's where the help is. Not someone online. All you got to do is ask. God doesn't have a password. You don't have to do a double identification thing. You know, his internet is never down. It's always around. And he will get you through them, but not by going around them, right through them. Confident, brave, and joyful. So to wind up here, there's two other quotes that I want to leave you with. Early in his papacy, Pope Benedict XVI said something I think is, personal opinion, the best thing he said, and particularly applies to tonight, and I'm sure many of you have heard this. The world offers you comfort, but you were not made for comfort. You were made for greatness. And then I want to go back to Paul one more time. I will maintain that, I don't think the church says this, but I call Paul the patron saint of run-on sentences. Right? Right? Yeah. How can you make 3 paragraphs out of 1 sentence? Trim it down, Paulie. Come on. And I'm a little partial to his letters to Timothy for obvious reasons. But in his second letter to Timothy, he's trying to give Timothy advice when the going gets tough, when you don't know what to do, when you have nowhere else to turn, when you think I'm starting to sound like the Gipper now, or the boys are up against it. You know. If that's starting to happen, this is what Paul told Timothy. I charge you in the presence of God and of Christ Jesus, who will judge the living and the dead, and by his appearing and his kingly power, proclaim the word. Be persistent, whether it is convenient or inconvenient. Convince, reprimand, encourage through all patience and teaching. For the time will come when people will not tolerate sound doctrine, but following their own desires and insatiable curiosity will accumulate teachers and will stop listening to the truth and will be diverted to myths. But you, be self-possessed in all circumstances. Put up with hardship. Perform the work of an evangelist. Fulfill your ministry. So I want to end where I started with Pius X. In issues like this and in so many other issues we deal with in our earthly life, our mission is to protect others from error. Thank you all. God bless you all. Be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
Comments? Teach me something? Yes, sir.
Let me come to you right now.
Is this a Western problem? You haven't talked about the East, Russia, China, India.
The countries I mentioned that are shut, that's a very good question. If you go to Eastern Europe, to the Far East, into Africa, nothing. Now, that may be cultural. A lot of them are heavily Muslim populations as well. But it is the more developed, industrialized Western civilization countries. Japan, Korea really doesn't deal with it. But it's Australia, New Zealand, and Western Europe, the US, Canada, about half of the South American countries. And they're going to be the next ones to start shutting it down too, I think. Anyway, so that's a very good question. Thank you. Anyone else? Sir.
The old comment that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, which everybody has heard, that's a confirmation of our inbred biological tendencies,
Mm-hmm.
motivation,
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah, the blurring of the lines
Right.
for gender. Really, I mean, go back to the 60s, 70s when it really first started. And whether you attribute that to, the momentum of the gay movement or the feminist movement, what have you, all of that is of a piece. But that dichotomy I mentioned, the differentiation, male, female. Now, a quick comment, when you hear the comment about intersex, and it's a thing, biologically, there are women are XX, men are XY. There are XXYs, there are XYYs, there's an XO, which is only one chromosome. Those are all things, but that accounts for about 1 in 50 to 100,000 people. And the phrase that I like to follow, the Y chromosome, is what differentiates male from female. So if anybody ever brings that up, just say, if there's a Y, it's a guy. That's what you tell them, so, okay? All right. Any others? Yes, ma'am.
So you said that people who are transitioning don't usually tell that they don't talk to family or friends or whatever that they're doing it. But if you know that, I mean, you know there's something going on, how would you address that to someone who's not close but you know?
Yeah, that's and that is a very pertinent question because, even just in the past week, stories of transitions taking place in schools, but the parents aren't informed. They're transitioning, the school staff is helping them get the puberty blockers, things like that. It really is, it's almost like trying to plan an intervention, a family intervention type thing. But the question has to be out there. Because if I have to encounter a situation like that, and it's someone that, I don't care if it's someone I care for or I don't care for, if it's someone that's here with me on this planet, if I don't say something, 5 years, 10 years, rest of my life, why didn't I say something? Why wouldn't I do that? You're going to lose, you lose friends. You may lose family members. And they're families that are, I hesitate to say this because I don't want to bring people down with it, but there are websites. There's a particular website called GenSpect, and another one called PITT. It's all an acronym, Parents of Inconvenient Truthful Transition, something like that. Those are websites that are run by parents and former detransitioners. And you read these stories, I would encourage you, don't read them when you're in a really good mood, because if you're in a bad mood, it's going to get worse. It is a tragedy, these families that are broke apart. I had a phone call about 6-8 months ago from CEO of a bank in New Hampshire. He'd heard about what we do in the CMA with this. He's Ivy League, his wife is Ivy League. Their son is at Harvard or Yale, one of the two, and their daughter's at Princeton. She goes off to Princeton. She is the girly girl. She comes home between freshman and sophomore year. Dad, I'm trans. Out of the blue. And the poor guy, I haven't heard from him in about a month or so, but it is not going well. It is not going well. But God bless him, he and his wife are still hanging in there. They're still trying to do what they can. And so many of these parents, there's no contact. Their kids have shut them out entirely. So, it is, if it becomes a problem, God willing that as the awareness increases and people like you start understanding this, it becomes abnormal again. it becomes out of the ordinary again. Because there was a period of time where it looked like it was going to become, yeah, that's just the way it is. It's not the way it is. It's not the way it was. It's not the way it was in the book of Genesis. Yes, ma'am, please.
I feel like there's so much societal influence regarding this issue as well. I mean, I remember maybe a decade or so ago when, certain people were like, well, we don't know if it's a boy or girl, we're gonna let them decide.
Yeah.
Like you don't even announce the gender.
Right.
Or they're gonna have gender neutral clothing and boys are gonna get all these traditional girl dolls, toys, kitchens. And,
Yeah.
I feel like there's just been this real big influence in society. It's
Yeah.
not simply internet and all this and that.
Right,
I mean,
right.
It's a lot of things. And I feel like in this day and age, I know of a few people who have young children who appear to be a different gender at a very young age. Boys who want to do dolls and cook and dress up as princesses and, girls that want to do the opposite. And I think right away those people are thinking, oh, well, they are really meant to be something else.
Right.
And they kind of,
Yeah.
accept it, whereas when my dad was growing up, boys were boys and girls were girls.
Right.
It was very clear.
Yep.
And, so I think there's so much confusion.
Right. There's that, yeah.
Society doing it. The other thing I want to say is multiple states now are passing laws that they can't
Right.
use these
Right.
story blockers on young children.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, back
We're
in,
getting stuck.
yeah, in June, at the Supreme Court and CMA, we filed an amicus brief for this case. It was the U.S. v. Skermeti. And it was the Biden administration, was left over from the Biden administration. Unfortunately, the Trump administration let it carry on. Skermeti's the Attorney General in Tennessee. And Tennessee put a ban on these interventions for minors. And Iowa has it too. And there's 27 states that have that ban, which is really good. They're being challenged. And the Supreme Court ruled. It was, 6-3. It's going to be 6-3 and something like that. But what's really important is in the past 2 weeks, there have been two other cases, one in Arkansas, one in, can't think of the other one, where it was appealed in states that had bans, and the U.S. District Court said, no, this is the way it should be. Because the claim was you're discriminating based on sex. You're dealing with somebody that doesn't know their sex. How could it's a discrimination based on medical practice? No, it's not based on medical practice. So, and probably one of the most telling comments along those lines of, you can blame it on peer pressure, social media, all that. A nurse at a gender clinic in Missouri, she left her job because she realized, she was about 30 years old. She said, when I was 15 years old, my friends and I all went to the mall together. Now I see 15-year-old groups of girls coming in to get their testosterone shots together. That's when you're in the ditch. So making what seems to be cool, it's not cool. So unfortunately, I think we have parents that think, well, I see it online, all the cool parents are doing this is the hip thing to do, so we need to get with the times. We got to make it uncool real fast. So, yes, sir.
The opposite way that they're saying, like in schools now, you have to teach some of these real liberal states about you have to teach this transgender stuff. Is there the opposite of talking and teaching what you just taught us?
If you can get in the schools. Basically, it means good people. You saw this in Northern Virginia, Loudoun County, Fairfax County. Good people getting on the school board. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Tiffany Justice. Tiffany Justice is the founder of Moms for Liberty. I was at a meeting back in, whenever that was, July, and happened to be sitting next to her at dinner. And she was a mom. She was a stay-at-home mom, 3 kids in school, but she was in a Northern Virginia school district that was doing exactly that. They were providing contraceptives to students. They were helping them schedule abortions. They were helping them transition. They were letting boys in the girls' bathroom, the whole thing. And she said, no, this won't stand. So she runs for school board. Got the whole thing thrown out. So that's what it takes. When good people do nothing happens. So, Yes.
So Doc, I hear you say, let's have this conversation with someone that maybe we, someone we work with. So how did you start it? What do you say?
How do you what?
How do you start the conversation when we're observing that they're making
Yeah.
a change?
Yeah.
How do I start that conversation?
Yeah, I mean-
I'm open for suggestions.
Yeah, oh no, basically, yeah. I've thought about that a lot, and I'll tell you, if you put 5 different people I knew in front of me that I had to have a conversation with, it would be 5 different opening statements. Because I know this is the guy that if I raise any questions about his kids, I get a broken nose, you know? And this is the guy that, or the gal that's gonna go in one ear and out the other. But I mean, there's just got to be the entry into it. And so maybe sometime, in a way, I look at it like evangelization. You know, Jesus didn't yell at the fish to get him in the boat, you know? He said, you got to accompany people and getting to know people like that and getting them to understand where you're coming from. And that time will come when the more personal, more emotional, and frankly, the more dangerous topics are going to come up. So I don't think it's going to be, starter's gun and I'm going to throw this question at you. I think it's going to take some investment.
Walk with them for a little bit and get to know them so you're not coming across.
Yep. If it's someone that already trusts you, day one, minute one, bring it up. If somebody, but that's the risk. You step too far too soon, you may lose it, but at least you said something. So, okay, thank you. Yes, yeah.
Now they're putting gender on the bathrooms. Now, is that saying that the politicians or whatever are saying it's okay now?
I think we're going to see a reverse in that. I can look at my wife back here and smile because there's the reason we don't go to Target to shop, you know. I don't know. I don't get out enough to know how many places are still are doing that. I don't think places are starting to do it. I think they've seen over, the backlash after, where they've seen the results of an election. Elections matter, and they saw, wait a minute, we thought the 10% that were on the other side, they were the cool kids. No, they got thrown out. So I think you're going to see that differentiation for bathrooms, locker rooms, things like that. I hope it's going to become clearer and get back to what it should be. So, yes.
Apparently this can happen without parental consent, but is there any kind of age limit? Is there any kind of requirements or like any kind of therapy or
No.
And who's paying for this?
Right, yep. Age limit in the states that ban it, they're typically 18 and younger. You can't do it. You can't do this stuff. Other states, there's 8-year-olds, 7-year-olds that are being started on it. So, started on the medications. And there was one other, the last point you made. Yeah, who's paying for it? I don't know. I mean, we know that the number one provider of the medications is Planned Parenthood. They're the ones that, if they're good at anything, they're good at diversifying their business. Because they went from surgical abortions, now they're 90% chemical abortions. And they realize, wait a minute, we get cash on the table, but we can also sign kids up for Medicaid too. So we can get Medicaid dollars as well. So, and there's states that California's tried to do it, and Vermont has done it, I believe. They're sanctuary states for transition. In California, they want to say if your kid is in another state, they come to California, we'll take care of that kid, and the parents have no right to that child to do that. So totally turning the societal ladder upside down. There was one other comment I was going to make. See what that memory does? That's what lasagna does to me. What's that? So
No requirement of any kind of counseling.
No, and thank you. That's what I wanted to get to. Keep your eyes on a Supreme Court case coming up. Should be in October. Childs v. Salazar. Laurel Childs is a counselor in Colorado. She's suing the state of Colorado because they tell her if a child comes into you with this problem, you can't tell them there's an alternative. It's against the law to counsel a child that let's wait. You got to just send them along. Colorado is California without the beach. Yes, Father.
I don't have a question, I'm just gonna add to this. The other thing too that's complicating a lot of this is the hypersexualization of our children. For a lot of you seniors out there, I'm probably gonna shock you with what I'm about to tell you. But do you know what the average age is today of somebody viewing porn for the first time is? It's 8 years old.
8 years old. Yep.
Third grade. Third grade is the average age today of kids viewing porn for the first time. And the goal of the porn industry is to get them addicted by the time they're 13. Because if they're addicted by the time they're 13, that's 8th grade, they're 75% likely to be a consumer for the rest of their life and not get off of porn. So you gotta understand there's a whole other dimension we didn't even touch on today, the porn pandemic, that's fueling this and setting fire into this issue on top of what we're already going through here. And so again, I mean, your kids, your grandkids, they're not safe.
Yep.
These things are destroying their souls. So I'm just telling you right now, this is a big uphill battle. That's more than just this topic.
Yep.
And it spans out over several topics.
Exactly.
So I'm just gonna add that comment, and then Calvin here's got a question.
Absolutely.
Well, I just had a comment. It seems like, in general, parents today are all about making their kids happy.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if this might make Johnny happy, and, maybe it's just a phase.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, just.
Yeah, I think if you look at a birth certificate, there's a line there that says parent's name. It doesn't say friend's name. It says parent's name. Parent first, friend second. We have 5 adult children. They're our best friends. When they were teenagers, they weren't our best friends, you know? So, yeah.
I have a question real quick.
Yes, please.
What happened to tomboys? Like, I was a tomboy.
Right.
My brothers were able to play with babies because they had younger sisters. Like, why is that not okay anymore?
Yeah. Yeah, we have a couple granddaughters that I think will be professional wrestlers, but on the men's side. Please.
Hi.
Hi.
So, I'm currently going into the medical field in school. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on how this is going to impact the medical field long term. Like, how are we going to care for these people? Are we going to have additional classes and learning?
That's a bright spot. And I have to say that because it makes me feel responsible. Y'all know the definition of an expert, somebody who comes from 50 miles away, wears a suit, and doesn't have any responsibility for fixing the problem. Well, I'm not from 50 miles away. But anyway, to get back to that, there is a project that we in CMA are working with, along with, there's the CMDA, the Christian Medical Dental Association, which is kind of our Protestant brothers and sisters. And there is an organization called the Resilience Network. And what we are doing, we're building a network of people in healthcare around the country specifically to take care of these detransitioners. Because we don't know what to do with them. The drugs they've taken, we have no science that tells us how to reverse that. The surgeries, that's done. You can't change that. But the medical side of it, we need to do that to take care of them, and then we can get the information we need so we know what to do better the next year and the next year and the next year. But medicine in general, one of the medical groups that has supported gender-affirming care is the Endocrine Society, the gland doctors, okay? They're the ones in charge of hormones and all of that. There was a report in the Wall Street Journal early this year. A reporter went to the Endocrine Society's meeting, and there were 25% of the papers were about gender-affirming care. But this reporter went through the hallways and the rooms and interviewed endocrinologists. 95% of them don't think it's good. They just don't speak up. because the people making the policies are up here. And in medicine nowadays, we saw this start with COVID, and we see it now. If you buck the system, you lose your board certification. You lose your hospital privileges. You lose your career. So that cancel culture is a real thing in medicine too. And the bravest portion of at least I can only speak for CMA, our fastest growing group in the past 10 years has been medical students. We see these medical students coming in, they are ready to go to war. They are true believers, and they're going to win this thing, but we've got to have their back. We've got to just tell them, we got you, whatever you need, we can help out. So it's going to take that bravery. So, yeah.
I was wondering if there was any data corresponding with higher rates of transgenderism with broken homes.
Absolutely.
Specifically with
Absolutely.
fathers outside of the house and stuff.
Yep. I think if you chart that out over the past 50 years, you look at the breakdown of the family, you see the breakdown in this kind of, it all trends in the same way. Abortions, sterilizations, contraceptive use, transitioning, all of that stuff is of a piece. What we heard at Fatima, it's the family. The family. It's got to stick together. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. It doesn't take a village, it takes a family.
Yes, we raised 5 children, but it was probably about 10 years ago when I walked into Target and we just started the whole gender neutral background situation. I had probably at that time 4-year-old granddaughter with me. I came home with my husband and I said, that's it. I'm not going into a woman's restroom with my granddaughter and knowing that there may be a man in there. It's not safe for her, it's not safe for me. So we, at that moment, decided we would no longer shop at Target. I haven't been back. Mm-hmm. It has been hard. Target has everything. And they have everything. So it has been hard. We've had to find alternatives. So what I guess I'm saying is in any issue, when you decide to take a stand, you have to just be strong. You have to make a decision and stay firm. But when you're confronting someone, when you're interacting with someone that may be in a work situation or whatever, I think you come forward first with love. I care about you, therefore, I'd like to ask you a question. So I think you have to soften the blow by showing that you care about that person and you're concerned about their ultimate welfare.
She's right. I tell people it's been 46 years in a row. This woman has perseverance. Has he another? Yes, please.
What do you say to young people? I mean, I was put in a situation where a friend of a friend, their daughter was 11. She said to me, well, I don't know what I am yet. And I don't have children. And I literally did not know what to say.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
have you talked to your mother about this?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's it.
I did not know. I mean, what are you asking me for? What are you saying this to me for?
That's a different, now if you're talking to an adult, that's a different conversation. Because the advantage that kids have is if you walk and talk them through it, they will make sense of it. They'll make sense of it. Maybe you're the tomboy. But in that instance, and I compare these conversations with kids. When people say, how do we get more priests? Well, we can talk to the school students all day long. What about mom and dad around the kitchen table when they're in kindergarten? Have you ever thought about being a priest? Well, you're really a girl. I mean, just reinforcing that kind of stuff and letting the kids are going to mull it over. They got nothing else to think about, addition, subtraction, and am I a boy or a girl? So.
Last question.
What? Absolutely, Father.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Doctor. I'm a retired school teacher. I retired in 1993.
Just in time.
Heard of transgender?
No.
When did that come about?
That term was coined in the mid-'60s. That was the first time it showed up in the literature, was transgender. And that just reflects this explosion. Until Caitlyn Jenner came along, did we know anything about this? That's where the term came into play. It'd been in the dictionary for a long time, but only in the past 10, 15 years. Yeah.
What year was that, doctor?
I think it was 65, if I remember correctly. It was mid-60s. I know that. Yep. Yep.
Well, I
'Cause you-
heard your presentation, and God is infallible. He does not make mistakes.
Nope. Nope. Nope.
And there is male and female.
Yep.
That's it.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. Appreciate it.